Hello, everyone, and welcome back to English in Fluency. I am your host, Alex, and I am so happy you are here with me today for another deep dive into the English language. Have you ever been in a situation where you are listening to someone speak, maybe a friend telling a story or a colleague giving a presentation, and you understand every single word they say? The beginning is clear, the middle is interesting, but then they reach the end, and suddenly you feel lost. You nod your head, you smile, but inside you are thinking, what was the point? What did they just decide? This happens to so many learners at the B1 level, and today we are going to fix that completely. We are going to focus on understanding summaries and conclusions so that you can catch the final message clearly every single time. It is not just about knowing the words, it is about knowing the structure and the signals that tell you the most important part is coming up. So grab a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and let's start this journey together to fluency. To truly master a language, you have to master the art of listening for the bottom line, which is how we often refer to the final conclusion in English. When people speak, they usually give details first, maybe some background information, and then they wrap it all up with a summary or a final decision. If you miss the wrap-up, you miss the whole point. Imagine you are listening to a long story about a terrible day at the office. The printer broke, the coffee was cold, the boss was angry, and then the person stops. You wait for them to say why they are telling you this, but they just look at you. Usually, the end of the story connects to a request, like, "So, can you help me fix the printer tomorrow?" That is the conclusion, and that is what we need to catch. We are going to practice this with several different scenarios today, using new characters and realistic situations that you might encounter in your daily life, and I will be here to guide you through every single sentence to ensure you understand exactly how to find the main message. Let's jump right into our first scenario with two friends, Leo and Maya. They are sitting in a park on a sunny afternoon discussing their summer holiday plans. Leo loves adventure and wants to go hiking, while Maya prefers relaxing on a beach. Listen closely to how their conversation flows, and notice the moment they reach a conclusion. Leo starts by talking about the mountains, how fresh the air is, and how much exercise they would get. He explains that they could camp under the stars and cook their own food, which sounds fun to him. Maya listens politely and then responds by talking about the ocean, the sound of the waves, and how she just wants to read a book and sleep for a week. She mentions that she is tired from work and needs to rest her body, not climb up a hill. They go back and forth for a few minutes, listing the pros and cons of mountains versus beaches, until finally Leo sighs and says, "Look, Maya, the whole point of this trip is for us to have fun together, and since you really need to rest, we should go to the beach so you are happy." Did you catch that? Leo's conclusion was that the destination matters less than Maya's happiness, so the final decision is the beach. The signal phrase there was, "the whole point is," which is a great clue that a summary is coming. Now, let's analyze that a bit deeper before we move on. When Leo said, "the whole point is," he was summarizing his feelings. He realized that the details of the trip were less important than the goal of the trip, which was their happiness. In English, we use phrases like basically, in short, ultimately, or the bottom line is to signal that we are about to say the most important thing. If you are listening and you hear these words, your brain should immediately switch to high alert mode, because the conclusion is right around the corner. Let's try another example, this time in a more formal setting, to see how this works in a business environment. In our next scene, we meet a manager named Sarah and her employee, David. They are in an office meeting room, discussing a project that has been running for 3 months. David is showing Sarah the charts and the numbers, explaining that sales went up in February, but down in March, and that the marketing campaign was expensive. He gives her a lot of data about customer feedback and website traffic. It is a lot of information to take in all at once. Sarah listens patiently, looking at the papers, and then she leans forward and asks David what all this data means for the future of the product. David takes a deep breath and says, "Well, considering the costs and the recent drop in sales, we need to stop the project for now and focus on something else." Here, David gives a summary of the situation and a conclusion based on the evidence. He didn't just say stop, he connected it to the information he provided earlier. If you had stopped listening after the sales numbers, you wouldn't know the final decision. The key was listening to the end where he gave the verdict. This is crucial for B1 learners because it trains you to hold information in your mind until the speaker ties it all together. Let's continue practicing with a different type of relationship, perhaps a conversation between a brother and sister, Tom and Sophie. They are planning a surprise birthday party for their mother. Tom wants to invite all the relatives and have a big band play music, while Sophie thinks their mother prefers small, quiet gatherings. They are arguing in the kitchen. Tom is saying, "But Mom loves music. Remember how she used to dance?" And Sophie is replying, "Yes, but she also gets tired easily now, and loud noises give her a headache." They debate the guest list, the food, and the music for several minutes. It seems like they cannot agree. Finally, Sophie puts her hand on Tom's arm and says, "Tom, I know you want a big party, but the most important thing is that Mom enjoys herself without stress. So let's just have a nice dinner with the family." Tom thinks for a second and nods, saying, "You are right. That is the best plan." Here, Sophie uses the phrase, "the most important thing is," to signal her conclusion. She summarizes the problem, which is their mother's stress levels, and concludes that a small dinner is the solution. Notice how the tone changes when they reach the conclusion. The argument stops, and they agree. This emotional shift is another clue that the final message has been delivered. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about inference, which is when you understand the conclusion, even if the person does not say it directly. Sometimes, at the B1 level, speakers will hint at their final message rather than stating it plainly. For example, imagine a friend named Chloe calls you on the phone. She talks for 10 minutes about how busy she is at work, how she hasn't slept in 2 days, and how her apartment is a mess because she has no time to clean. She never directly asks for help, but at the end of the call, she says, "I really don't know how I am going to cook dinner tonight." The conclusion here, the message she is sending, is that she needs help, or perhaps she wants you to bring her food. Understanding this requires you to listen to the summary of her problems, tired, busy, messy house, and connect it to her final statement about dinner. She is concluding that she cannot manage dinner on her own. To catch this message clearly, you have to listen to the emotion in her voice and the context of the whole conversation. Let's try a listening exercise involving a teacher and a student, which is a very common situation for language learners. Mr. Henderson is a history teacher, and he is talking to a student named Emily about her essay. He starts by pointing out specific details, like the grammar was good and the handwriting was neat. He says she included some interesting facts about the war, but then he pauses. He tells her that she forgot to mention the main cause of the conflict, and she didn't answer the question in the prompt. He explains that this is a big problem because the essay is supposed to be about the causes. At the end of their conversation, Mr. Henderson looks at Emily and says, "So, even though the writing is beautiful, the content is not quite there yet, so I have to give it a C grade." Emily is disappointed, but she understands. Mr. Henderson used the phrase, "so even though," to introduce his final decision. This contrast structure, acknowledging the good points before stating the final negative conclusion, is very common in English feedback. If you only listened to the first part where he praised her handwriting, you would be shocked by the C grade. You must wait for the "so" or the "however" to hear the true result. Moving on, let's look at a scenario involving shopping decisions. This is something everyone does, and it is full of summaries and conclusions. Meet a couple, James and Linda, who are looking to buy a new car. They are at a dealership. James loves a red sports car that goes very fast. He talks about the engine, the leather seats, and how cool it looks. Linda is worried about safety and price. She points out that the sports car uses a lot of gas and doesn't have enough room for their 2 dogs and the baby stroller. They test drive the red car, and then they test drive a blue SUV. James thinks the SUV is boring, but Linda says it feels safer. After driving both cars, they stand on the sidewalk and talk. James says, "I know the red car is fun, but you are right, we can't fit the dogs in it." Linda smiles and says, "Exactly. So the SUV is the practical choice for our family right now." James agrees and says, "Okay, let's buy the blue one." The conclusion here is the decision to buy the SUV, but it came after summarizing the practical needs of the family. The phrase, "practical choice for our family right now," summarizes their reasoning. I would like you to notice how, in all these examples, the conclusion brings the conversation to a stop. It provides a sense of closure. When you are listening to English, whether it is a podcast, a movie, or a real-life conversation, you should feel a sense of relief when you hear the conclusion because it means you don't have to guess anymore. The hard part is waiting for it. It requires patience. At the B1 level, your brain is working hard to translate and understand the vocabulary, so by the time the speaker gets to the end, you might be tired. This is why practicing with these specific scenarios helps. It trains your brain to stay engaged just a little bit longer until the speaker says those magic words like, "in conclusion," "therefore," "as a result," or "so." Let's try a more complex story now, involving 3 colleagues planning a conference. Their names are Rachel, Mark, and Lisa. They are in a coffee shop with notebooks open. Rachel suggests they hold the conference in London because it is easy to get to. Mark suggests Paris because it is more exciting and would attract more people. Lisa is worried about the budget. She writes down the costs for London and compares them to Paris. She notices that the hotels in Paris are very expensive, while London is slightly cheaper. They discuss the venue options, the catering costs, and the speakers they want to invite. Rachel argues that London is better for business, while Mark argues that Paris is better for networking. This debate goes on for quite a while, and they drink their coffee while looking at the numbers. Finally, Lisa closes her notebook and says, "Okay, everyone, we want a lot of people to come. But we also have a strict budget, so London is the only option that allows us to stay within our money limits." Rachel nods, and even though Mark is disappointed, he agrees. Lisa's conclusion was based on a summary of the budget. She used the phrase, "So London is the only option," to deliver the final message. Now, let's switch gears to a medical context, which is very important to understand clearly. Imagine a patient named Mr. Green is talking to his doctor, Dr. Evans. Mr. Green has been having stomach pain. Dr. Evans asks him what he eats, how much water he drinks, and if he exercises. Mr. Green admits he eats a lot of spicy food and drinks very little water. Dr. Evans examines him and runs some tests. A few days later, they meet again to discuss the results. Dr. Evans looks at the report and explains that Mr. Green has mild gastritis, which is an inflammation of the stomach lining. She explains that the spicy food is irritating his stomach, and the lack of water is making it worse. She then tells him about the medicine he needs to take. At the end of the appointment, Dr. Evans says, "To sum it up, if you stop eating spicy food, drink more water, and take this medicine for 2 weeks, the pain will go away." This is a perfect example of a summary conclusion. She lists the actions he must take and the result that will follow. The phrase, "to sum it up," is your cue to listen carefully to the instructions. We should also practice listening to conclusions that express an opinion or a feeling, rather than just a plan or a decision. Imagine two friends, Ben and Olivia, who just watched a new movie at the cinema. They walk out of the theater discussing the actors, the special effects, and the music. Ben thinks the acting was great, but Olivia thinks the story was too slow. They talk about their favorite scenes and the plot twists. As they reach the bus stop, Ben asks Olivia what she really thought of the movie overall. Olivia thinks for a moment and says, "Well, the visuals were amazing, but the story was confusing, so ultimately, I didn't enjoy it very much." Here, Olivia weighs the good points against the bad points and gives her final opinion. Ultimately is a strong word that means in the end or after considering everything. It signals that she has made her final judgment. Understanding this helps you know exactly how she feels, which is the main point of the conversation. Let's do one more practice session, this time with a landlord and a tenant. This is a practical situation you might face if you live in an English-speaking country. The landlord is Mr. Black, and the tenant is a young woman named Emma. Emma is calling Mr. Black to report a problem with the heating in her apartment. She explains that it is very cold. The radiator makes a funny noise, and she has tried to fix it herself but couldn't. She tells him she turned the thermostat up, but nothing happened. Mr. Black listens and asks a few questions about when the problem started. He says he remembers the heating system is old and might need a professional to look at it. After discussing the schedule and the cost, Mr. Black tells Emma, "I will call a repairman tomorrow morning, and he should be there by the afternoon to fix it for you." Emma thanks him and hangs up. The conclusion here is the plan of action. A repairman is coming. Mr. Black summarized the solution without using complex phrases. but his statement about what he will do tomorrow serves as the conclusion to the problem. As we continue with our lesson, I want to emphasize that tone of voice plays a huge role in understanding the final message. Sometimes, the words themselves are not as strong as the way they are said. For instance, if a friend says, "Sure, let's go to that restaurant," but their voice sounds flat and unenthusiastic, the conclusion might actually be that they don't want to go. They might be saying yes just to be polite, but the real message is in the tone. However, for B1 listening practice, we usually focus on the clear language markers first. Once you master phrases like "in conclusion," "all in all," "therefore," "consequently," and "as a result," you will find that your comprehension improves dramatically. Let's revisit the concept of catching the final message clearly in a group setting. Imagine a family meeting where parents, named John and Mary, are talking to their teenage son, Sam, about his grades. John talks about how important school is for his future. Mary talks about how she is worried because Sam is playing too many video games. Sam argues that he is smart and can catch up later. They go back and forth about time management, homework, and college applications. It is a tense conversation. Finally, John takes a deep breath and says, "Sam, we love you, and we want you to have a good life. So we have decided to limit your video game time to 1 hour a day until your grades improve." This is the final message, the new rule. The phrase, "we have decided," indicates that the discussion is over and the conclusion has been reached. For a listener, this is the most critical piece of information because it dictates what happens next. Now, let's try to piece together a longer narrative to test your stamina and focus. This story is about a man named Simon, who is trying to decide whether to move to a new city for a job. He talks to his wife, Clara. Simon tells Clara about the new job offer. He explains that the salary is much higher than his current salary, and the company is very famous. He lists the benefits, like a company car and more vacation days. However, he also mentions that the new city is very far from their parents and friends. Clara listens and then shares her thoughts. She says she likes their current house, she loves her job, and she doesn't want to be lonely in a new place. They discuss the pros and cons for days. They make a list on a piece of paper. On one side, they write money and career, and on the other side, they write family and happiness. After looking at the list, Simon looks at Clara and says, "Money is important, but our happiness is more important, so I will turn down the job offer." Clara smiles and hugs him. The conclusion is clear. He is not taking the job. Simon summarized the situation by comparing money and happiness, leading to his decision. I hope you are seeing the pattern here. The summary usually restates the main problem or topic, and the conclusion offers a solution, a decision, or an opinion. To help you further, I want to give you a few more specific phrases that you should listen out for. If you hear "the bottom line is," get ready for the most important fact. If you hear "what it comes down to is," the speaker is simplifying a complex situation into one main point. If you hear "in a nutshell," the speaker is about to give you a very short summary of a long story. These are your anchors in a sea of words. When you hear them, hold on tight, because the main message is about to be spoken. Let's practice with a scenario about a cooking disaster. A woman named Jenny is calling her neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, because she is baking a cake for a party, and it has burned. Jenny explains that she set the oven to the wrong temperature and forgot to set a timer because she was on the phone. She describes the black smoke and the smell. Mrs. Higgins laughs kindly and asks if Jenny has enough ingredients to make another one. Jenny checks her cupboard and says she has no more flour. Mrs. Higgins thinks for a second and says, "Don't worry, I have plenty of flour and sugar, so come over to my house and we can bake a new cake together." The conclusion here is the solution to the problem. They will bake together at the neighbor's house. The phrase, "so come over," signals the result of their discussion. It is a helpful and kind conclusion. Another area where understanding conclusions is vital is in giving and receiving directions. Imagine a tourist named Peter is lost on the street. He stops a local resident named Anna to ask for directions to the museum. Anna tries to explain the way. She says, "Go straight, turn left at the bank, and then walk 2 blocks." Peter looks confused and asks if it is far. Anna adds more details like, "You will see a big park on your right," and "the building is blue." Peter is still not sure he understands. Finally, Anna points to a bus stop nearby and says, "Actually, it is too far to walk, so the easiest way is to just take the number 5 bus from here." The conclusion is the best advice. Take the bus. She summarized the difficulty of walking and concluded that the bus is the better option. If Peter had stopped listening after the first set of directions, he would be walking in circles. Let's consider a scenario involving a return policy at a store, which is a very practical listening skill. A customer named Robert is at a customer service desk. He wants to return a jacket he bought last week. The assistant, named Kate, asks him why he wants to return it. Robert says it is too small, and the color is not what he expected. Kate checks the receipt and asks if he has the tags. Robert shows her that the tags are still on the jacket. Kate checks the computer system and explains the store policy. She says usually they only offer store credit, but since he bought it less than a week ago, she can do a full refund to his card. She finishes the transaction and hands him the receipt. Then she says, "So, the money will be back in your account within 3 business days." This is the final message Robert needs to hear. It tells him what to expect next. The "so" indicates the conclusion of the return process. We are going to do one more complex dialogue to really test your skills. This is between a boss named Mr. Stone and his assistant, Susan. They are planning the office holiday party. Mr. Stone wants it to be elegant, with fancy food and jazz music. Susan suggests that the employees might prefer something more casual, like a pizza party with games. They discuss the budget. Mr. Stone says the budget is tight, so jazz music might be too expensive. Susan suggests hiring a DJ instead, which is cheaper. They talk about the venue. Mr. Stone wants a hotel ballroom, but Susan suggests using the large conference room in their office building to save money. They weigh the pros and cons of luxury versus saving money. Finally, Mr. Stone rubs his chin and says, "Susan, you make a good point about saving money. So let's have the party in the conference room with a DJ and order fancy pizza." This is a compromise conclusion. It is not exactly what Mr. Stone wanted originally, nor exactly what Susan wanted, but it is the result of their discussion. The conclusion is the plan for the party. I want to take a moment to remind you why we are doing this. Understanding summaries and conclusions is not just a grammar exercise, It is a life skill. It helps you navigate social situations, work environments, and everyday tasks without confusion. When you can catch the final message clearly, you become a confident communicator. You don't have to ask people to repeat themselves as often, and you can respond appropriately because you actually understand what was decided. This confidence is what English in fluency is all about. We want you to speak and listen with assurance. Let's look at a scenario involving a personal trainer and a client. The trainer is named Mike, and the client is named Jessica. Jessica wants to lose weight for her wedding. Mike asks her about her diet. Jessica admits she loves chocolate and eats out often. Mike asks about her exercise routine. Jessica says she walks her dog, but doesn't go to the gym. Mike creates a plan for her. He tells her to cut down on sugar, go to the gym 3 times a week, and drink more water. He explains how protein helps build muscle and how cardio burns fat. He gives her a lot of information about health and fitness. At the end of the session, Mike says, "If you follow this plan strictly for 3 months, you will definitely reach your goal weight." This is the conclusion, the promise of the result. The condition is, if you follow this plan, and the result is, you will reach your goal. This conditional structure is very common in conclusions. Now, imagine a conversation between 2 students, Kevin and Laura, who are studying for a science exam. They have been studying for hours. Kevin is reading the textbook out loud, explaining the theory of gravity. Laura is taking notes. They discuss the formulas they need to memorize. They are both getting tired. Kevin closes the book and stretches. He looks at Laura and says, "Okay, I think we have covered everything. We know the theory, and we have practiced the formulas, so we are ready for the exam." Laura agrees and closes her notebook. The conclusion here is a judgment of their readiness. Kevin summarized their study session, covered theory, and practiced formulas, and concluded that they are ready. This gives them both a sense of closure and relieves their anxiety. I would like to present a scenario now that involves a misunderstanding to show how important listening to the conclusion is. A man named Brian calls his internet provider to cancel his service because it is too slow. The customer service agent, named Tom, tries to keep Brian as a customer. Tom apologizes for the slow speed and explains that there is a new plan available that is faster and actually costs less money than Brian's current plan. Brian is skeptical and asks if there are any hidden fees. Tom assures him there are none and explains the benefits of the new router. Brian listens and compares the cost. Finally, Tom says, "So, I can switch you to this faster, cheaper plan right now, and you don't have to cancel." Brian pauses and realizes this is a better deal. He says, "Oh, in that case, I will stay." The conclusion of the call is the opposite of what Brian intended at the start, because he listened to the summary of the new deal. If he had stopped listening after his complaint, he would have canceled a service that he actually wanted to keep. Let's practice with a scenario about planning a weekend trip with a group of friends. 4 friends, Chris, Pat, Sam, and Joe, are sitting around a table. Chris wants to go camping. Pat wants to go to a water park. Sam wants to stay home and play video games. Joe wants to go to the cinema. They all talk at once, suggesting different ideas. It is chaotic. Chris reminds them that the weather forecast is sunny, perfect for camping. Pat reminds them that the water park is expensive and they are short on cash. Sam complains that he is tired from the work week. Joe suggests a compromise. She says, "Why don't we go to the cinema tonight? And then if the weather is nice tomorrow, we can have a barbecue in the park." Everyone stops talking. They think about it. Chris likes the outdoor part. Pat likes the idea of food. Sam likes the relaxing evening. Joe smiles and says, "Is it agreed then?" They all nod. The conclusion is the compromise plan. Joe's question, "Is it agreed then?" is the signal that the discussion has ended and a decision has been made. Another vital context for listening to conclusions is in news reports. Although this is a script, you can imagine listening to the news. A news anchor might say, "Today, the stock market had a volatile day. Prices went up in the morning due to positive economic reports, but fell in the afternoon because of concerns about inflation. Investors are worried about the future." After giving all these details, the anchor would conclude with, "As a result, the market closed lower than it opened yesterday." The phrase, "as a result," is the key. It tells you the outcome of all the previous details. Without listening to the end, you would know the market was volatile, but you wouldn't know if it ended up or down. Let's do one more role play between a teacher and a parent, Mrs. Weaver. Mrs. Weaver is meeting with her son's teacher, Mr. Clark. Her son, Timmy, has been having trouble behaving in class. Mr. Clark shows Mrs. Weaver Timmy's grades, which are good, but he also shows her a behavior chart with red marks. He explains that Timmy talks during lessons and doesn't listen to instructions. Mrs. Weaver looks upset and explains that Timmy doesn't get enough sleep at home because they recently moved to a noisy neighborhood. They discuss possible solutions, like an earlier bedtime or a reward system for good behavior. After a long discussion, Mr. Clark says, "In conclusion, I think if we work together at home and at school, Timmy's behavior will improve very quickly." Mrs. Weaver agrees to try harder at home. The conclusion is the partnership and the prediction for the future. We are getting towards the end of our lesson today, and I want to make sure you feel confident. The biggest takeaway I hope you have is that you should never stop listening early. The best information always comes at the end. Whether it is a decision about where to eat, a summary of a meeting, or a conclusion to a story. The final sentence holds the key to understanding. When you are watching English movies or TV shows, try to turn on the subtitles and watch for these conclusion phrases. When you hear them, pause the video and try to predict what the speaker will say next. This active practice will sharpen your skills. Let's look at a quick scenario about a lost item. A woman named Diana is frantically searching her purse for her keys. She is in a parking lot. She dumps everything out of her bag. Lipstick, wallet, receipts, phone, but no keys. Her friend, Kevin, helps her look. They check the ground around the car. They check the car door handle to see if she left them there. They look in her coat pockets. Diana is starting to panic. Kevin asks her to think back to where she last was. She says she was at the coffee shop. Kevin calls the coffee shop, but they haven't found any keys. Suddenly, Diana stops and pats her back pocket. She laughs and pulls out the keys. She says, "Oh my goodness, I was sitting on them the whole time." The conclusion to the mystery is that the keys were in her pocket. The phrase, "the whole time," summarizes the situation. Finally, I want to leave you with a conversation about a life change. A young man named Ryan is talking to his mentor, an older man named Arthur. Ryan tells Arthur that he is unhappy in his career as an accountant. He says he hates the numbers and the office environment. He admits that he has a secret passion for painting and wants to become an artist. He is scared to quit his job because he needs the money. Arthur listens and gives him advice. Arthur tells him that life is short and that he should pursue his passion. He shares a story about his own life and a risk he took. Ryan listens carefully and thinks about his future. After a long silence, Ryan takes a deep breath and says, "You are right, Arthur. I am going to save some money for a few months, and then I will quit my job to focus on painting." This is a major life conclusion. It is a decision that changes his path. Arthur's advice led to Ryan's conclusion. To wrap up this session on English and fluency, I want to thank you for sticking with me through all these examples. We have covered office meetings, family dinners, medical appointments, shopping trips, and life-changing decisions. In every case, the final message was the most important part. By listening for signal words like so, therefore, ultimately, in conclusion, and the bottom line, you can ensure that you never miss the point again. Keep practicing these listening skills every day, and you will see your fluency grow. Remember, English is not just about speaking. It is about understanding the world around you. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please make sure to subscribe to English in Fluency and hit the like button so more learners can find us. Leave a comment below telling me about a time you misunderstood a conclusion in English, or just say hello. I, Alex, will see you in the next video. Keep listening, keep learning, and catch that final message clearly. Bye for now.